differences. Can these foreign banks actually come in here and do serious business and have serious market penetration?
It's not a cultural issue, it's a regulatory issue. Foreign banks in China have 2% of total assets, and they're ain't going to go. Because the last thing the China government wants is competition with foreign banks. So that's not culture. The local financial service market is protected, and no competition. Banks have to have a certain margin in order to cover a certain kind of effect. Apart from that, also the word culture is not correct. Because cultural differences are becoming less and less relevant. Younger people know that there are 400,000 Chinese students in the US. It's very easy to deal with younger Chinese. You're no longer dealing with people coming from the Cultural Revolution and so on. What it really means eventually, but it doesn't apply to banking, is one-ship, which is this very tight web of relationship, which is totally impenetrable for a non-Chinese. But you have, the cousin, the wife of my cousin's sister is there. This kind of thing, this is also very much Italian, by the way. Is this web of personal relationship that is even more important than the institutional relationship, and that is impossible. Every time, all these years, every time we had a problem, and we tried to, among ourselves, to figure out what the issue should be. And we came up with Western scenario. It could be Jin Jun-jung, or it could be a change here. Maybe Jin Jun-jing doesn't like me, and this and that. And every time we then asked the Chinese, and the reality was 1,000 miles away. It was much more simpler, it was a completely different nature. So now when I'm posed with the relationship or a business Chinese problem that doesn't have a number attached to it, I don't even think. I ask. Period. Thank you.
My family's from Ukraine, and I actually recognise this stereotype that we have the Ukrainian clan groups as well, and it's very similar too. But Jean-Luc, do you think it's a cultural phenomenon? Can non-Chinese companies actually do serious business in China, or do they need to have joint ventures or partnerships?
I actually work in an industry which is a bit different from the banking industry. Actually, in the pharma industry, multinationals play a significant role. I think we have to look at it from the history. I think probably in the 80s, when the first companies came, the company from Sanofi 30 years ago, to China. I think at that time it was true and even probably required to have a Chinese partner. And that had a lot to do with culture, with understanding the market, understanding the regulations, understanding the complexity. But then after 30 years, companies have developed a lot of knowledge. A company like Sanofi today, we have 7,500 employees, we have 6 manufacturing sites. We know China pretty well. And that doesn't mean that we're not looking for partnerships. These are different kinds of partnerships we're looking at. We're looking for partnerships in terms of R&D, we're looking for partnerships to go into new businesses, but it's not only to do our base business, where I think we have developed quite a significant knowledge.
So in terms of this knowledge and experience of different cultures, I'll come back to you, Alberto. Give me one story or anecdote from your experience of cultural misunderstandings and a key lesson that we can learn from them.
Yeah, I mean, it was a time when we made the biggest Chinese acquisition in Europe, and we acquired a European company with many thousand workers, and in a highly unionized country, and the chairman of the acquirer, the Chinese company said, well, now we signed, we closed, so it's about time to announce that ownership change. So I think we should have like all the employees, several thousand, all together, and the announcement of the owners. And we have explained that ain't going to work like that. because the unions are not supposed to they're not supposed to get to get the acquired company manager lose face and go in front of everybody announce the new order. This is very much Chinese style. But in Europe, you have the unions are stuck to you, and then you have the workers in the room. It's going to be a mess. This ain't going to work. And that he backed off. We had another interesting case. It was the opposite. It was a big Italian company in the machinery sector. They had a company here in China. And some technician used to come down to teach the Chinese technician. So one of the technicians, before leaving, left a photo of himself on the machine, saying, please remember everything I told you and don't forget me. Okay? From the perspective of the Italian technician, that was very kind. Okay? It was a nightmare in Zimbabwe. We had the unions, we had month and month of letters. It was a disaster. We created a union because the Chinese took that as a very bad offense. It wasn't a joke at all for them. Yeah, it was no funny. But no funny. That was like little grain of sand. Well, that was a nightmare. That's totally unpredictable. I mean, totally unpredictable.
Can you match that one?
No.
I mean, it must be difficult for a Frenchman in China.
You cannot match Italian creativity. Because of the jokes.
You're used to
I cannot imagine. I mean, actually, when I was anticipating that question, I was actually thinking, honestly, I spent the first 20 years of my life in France and the second 28 years outside of France, and most of the time in Asia. And still, I don't come on being ethnic. So for me, it's still being that still the cultural differences are probably not as important as actually the fact that we're all human beings and we share much more actually that we don't have in common. But just one thing, which is always a little bit sensitive to me, is about the names. You mentioned my name. I mean, the first name is actually Jean-Luc, and many people don't understand how it works, so they split it. So they call it Jean, which for me is a totally different name, so I don't understand they talk to me. And they pronounce it in the American way, it becomes Jean, then it becomes a lady's name, so I don't even understand at all they talk to me. And I realize in many countries it's actually quite complex. I mean, I lived in Thailand, so I had to get used to using the first name and putting Kun at the beginning. Then I used to Japan, and I used to live in Japan, and I had to understand that to whom do I say something san, or something Kun, or something sensei. And then came China, where half of the colleagues have English names, the other half have Chinese names, and I had to learn that if the first name has two characters, I cannot use it. I can use it, but if it has only one character, then I should use the last name at the same time. So I spent quite a lot of time when I meet people beforehand to make sure I call the people with the right name. Also, having lived in Germany, where you have to use the doctor title, if you go to Austria, you have to use that doctor. So I think the name is quite a tricky thing that you need to master.
How do you get used to the different working practices? I mean, you're used to having your 30, 40 days holiday here in France, and it must be a culture shock coming to China after that.
I think the dynamic is different. You are really carried by the dynamic of the market in which you work. And when you work in a market like China, where there's, our industry is growing 20%, our business has doubled over the last 5 years. So when you work in that kind of environment, you're carried back. So this is constant by itself.
So in your business experience, Alberto, how would the business approaches say differ between the Chinese and Americans and the Europeans, and even amongst the Europeans? What are your key observations?
They were ready for this. Oh, okay. First of all, this is like, we'd like to say, it's very Western to say, finally, I'm going to get down and get my pun. Don't we say that? It's about time that I face the situation, black or white, and that's it. That's the biggest mistake. ever possible never the Chinese. Ever. First, because if you're negotiating with him, you give me a clear picture where you stand. So you never want to do that. If you're not negotiating, you run the risk of being too direct. And being too direct in a negotiation doesn't work. Every time when you smile to the Chinese, it does reply with a smile. So they're very easygoing. Behind the facade of the formality, it is only apparent. But, so, if it is in building a relationship, it's great. But if you are in negotiation, you have a serious talk, then it's only indirect. Chinese would never say no. They hate to say no. And you never give a negative feedback to Chinese. You never say, you're not really good at numbers. You say, Michael, you see Andy? He does those numbers. I wonder how he did them, because he did them very well. So you always have to use almost like a priest, like using the Bible. And then what I always say, that's it.
Well, let me throw that over to you, Jean-Luc. You've worked for a number of companies as well, and you've seen these differences between the Americans and the Chinese. When the Americans say you got it, it generally means you don't got it. But how do you perceive these differences?
I cannot really talk the difference between the US and China because I've never lived in the US. I've been to one of the countries and I've never had the chance to leave. But if I compare Europe, and even Europe, let me compare France because all the countries in Europe are still very different. If I compare France with China, what I really like about China is that can-do attitude. I still believe because of the history, because of the very fast development of China over the last years, people here have an attitude of, okay, there might be a problem, but at the end of the day, there's a strong belief that tomorrow will be a better day. That belief is not necessarily there in Europe. I think many people, at least in France, have a little bit of a more of a conservative, let's protect what we have, and let's be a little bit fearful of tomorrow. I think Chinese usually have this idea that tomorrow will be a better day. So that helps very much to solve many of the issues. So even though there are cultural differences, even though we do have Chinese in our organization who say no, I think in all the countries, but I think because there is this overall desire of getting things done, it actually helps to overcome a lot of the differences.
Be amalgamating all of this experience, all of this knowledge, all of these rules into Jean-Luc, some kind of cultural intelligence unit at the center of every company, helping guide any ventures into foreign lands, particularly China.
That would be nice, huh? If we could have a central office in Paris where we just go for 1 week, and then after 1 week we know how to operate in all the countries in the world. I'm not underplaying the role of this kind of program. I think they're useful, but at the end of the day, I think if you really want to be successful in a country, I think you have to be very, at least as a company which has an operational business. And our business, actually healthcare, is very much linked to culture. Because as surprising as it seems, healthcare in France is not the same as healthcare in China. TCM the traditional Chinese medicine play a very big role here. They are inexistent in France. The way people treat certain diseases is very different from one country to the next. So therefore, in our industry, I think to be successful, you need to be very embedded in the society. You need to have a strong network, you need time. That's why it's good that we've been here 30 years. You need to have local management. You cannot have all your managers, expats, and then have very few local managers. You need to be close to the society. You need to live in there. You need to have a dialogue with the government to understand what the trend is in healthcare. So I think this is much more by being close to the society you're in all the countries, that you can be successful.
Alberto, would you like to run such a unit, giving all your colleagues advice on how to interact with different cultures and doing the role playing with them?
No, I'm a cultural ballistic person. I don't need a ballistic person. Then I tell you how it works. I did I do have 4 teams. One in Frankfurt, one in Milan, one in Beijing, and one in Shanghai. And on every deal, we have to work absolutely with complete coordination. That's a big seal. So over the first few years of my work, all I did was I was CC'd in every email. And I checked every single communication going on. Now my attention could not possibly be in content. That's why I know nothing about pharmaceuticals. We had 5 deals, I know nothing. I was focused on the way these people would interact with each other. To build a team. I could not afford that anyone would misbehave vis-a-vis the other. Because a little move like this will become a gigantic scar 2 years later. It just like it grows up. It's like an infection. So in most cases, it was the Europeans, 99% of the cases, being impolite and assuming. The Chinese were always very polite. The problem with Chinese is they don't volunteer their knowledge. They know things, but they don't tell them. So, first I had to quell all the problems with the Europeans. Stop making guesses about China. Stop telling the Chinese what to do. Don't have a colonizing mentality. And then I had to get the Chinese and I started. And my big thing of the day, you know what it is in China? What would you do? They come to me, vertical hierarchy, Alberto, we have a problem, and then I say, okay, what would you do? And then they have the solution. Okay? Very simple. You simply ask them what to do, push them to move forward, teach them that they have this problem with loss of faith, too many people in CC. Mr. Malagodi said that, and this is very stupid, what am I going to do? Come on, Mike, just say it. Just say it right away. You know how many times I wrote email for my Chinese colleagues? I was in the back, and I did the email, and then he pasted the copy and replied to my email. Then eventually they grew out of it, and then they speak up now. And I had to say, they want to be contradicted. I want to be contradicted because they know what to do, but their culture is to keep quiet, not to have a conflict. A conflict is always bad. Nobody wins in a conflict. Nobody conflict in China. Not to have a conflict, not to contradict. So if you're very aggressive, if you go to China and say, I want to do this and that, they think you're an absolute imbecile, but they still do it. They still do it, knowing that they're doing something wrong. If you don't force them to speak up, and if you don't force the European, in this particular case, to be more sensitive and more better listener. Thank you. But it's as complicated to explain to European to be a listener that it is explaining to Chinese to speak up. And easy to explain to Chinese to speak up. And then eventually, now they do it, right? I love it when they criticize. And now the piece of garbage, saying like that. Now they come out the window, whatever.
So bearing in mind all these experiences you've shared with us, what kind of advice would you give to Giordano, to Jack, to our friends at Pioneer?
No, the cultural unit. What I do in all these years, I keep saying all these things. So I already have written down. So when there is a guy, I simply do copy and paste, and I send a missile with 30 points. What you should always do in China, what you should never do. But it's all done. This is my culture unit. I have it all pasted up. Because I've been saying the same thing so many times over and over, that now I have it in 5. You know? Like a recipe to make spaghetti with tomato sauce, you know? Same stuff. This is my cultural ballistic. I don't need a unit. I need like some space in my hard drive.
So you've got your spaghetti with your tomato sauce. How much parmigiano, how much oregano do we add on that for this market? For Pioneer, your advice to our friends there. They've got their European products. Do they adjust them for the Chinese market? Do they come up with new products for the Chinese market?
this is a story, this is a regulatory story from here. I mean, then the Chinese now are starting to have quota to invest overseas. So that is growing. So the first natural market to attack is to draw Chinese money offshore. And the quota QDII is growing. But how to go and target high net worth individual in China, how to find them, because this is very low profile. This is not like Russia. Then you have the wealth you splash it. Here you have the wealth you stash it. Okay? Because if you raise your hand, you're screwed. I mean, when people come and say, don't you think it would be nice for a Chinese to own a football team in Italy? You got to be kidding. I mean, the Chinese buy a football team, it goes in the press, next time he comes to Beijing, you won't see him for 25 years, you know? So, did I answer?
How about you, John? There is the distribution challenge, but how about adapting the products for China? Do they need to be adapted, or can we sell European-style products for the Chinese market?
French way of answering the question is much less entertaining than the Italian one, but I think in our industry we need to have product adjusted. That's the topic, right? I mean, for example, the OTC product, you don't sell the same in China as you do in the second world. So certain products can be applied all around the world, etc. I would say 50% of the market has to be applied in different ways, and the smell has to be different, or the size has to be different, or the packaging has to be different, because again, there's nothing as closely linked to culture as healthcare.
Well, thank you, Jean-Luc. And I might just add an experience of my own, because we're at the Financial Times, we're really dealing with these cultural differences on a daily basis. In fact, my boss, who I answer to every day, who queries my expenses all the time, he's half Scottish and half German. So both sides of him want to get drunk all the time, but only one side is prepared to pay for the drinks. And let me tell you, that bill is getting more and more expensive when it comes to bailing out the euro by the day. So, ladies and gentlemen, please thank our two panelists, Alberto and Jean-Luc, for